title of her speech is The Meeting Seat. Her time is 8 to 10 minutes, and she will be evaluated by Joshua.
Sometimes there are situations in life where it feels like you were on a road trip. You were in the middle seat, squished between two or more choices, and you don't know which one to pick. And in some situations, you are afraid to choose either option. They seem scary and different. And you know you have to pick one, but you don't know which one to. Sometimes you just want to jump out of the middle seat and have space to move and take a breath. But the main thing keeping you in the middle seat is fear. Thank you, Pierce, Lucas, Gavel Master, fellow Gaveliers, and distinguished guests. How many of you are younger siblings? Keep your hands up. Now, how many of you have been forced to sit in the middle seat during a car ride or road trip? A lot of you. And since I am the youngest of the older kids in my family, I have been forced to sit in the middle seat practically every time I climb into our car. Everyone in here knows that being squished between two people is never really enjoyable. If you aren't a little sibling and have had the privilege of avoiding the middle seat, maybe you've been on a plane in the middle seat. If so, you know what I'm talking about. But aside from the literal middle seat, there is a figurative middle seat that I'm sure everyone in this room has found themselves in. And most of the reasons that you might have been stuck in that middle seat might have been fear. Fear keeps us back from doing many things. I've had times when I have been terrified to do things, like Gavel. Before I did Gavel, I had been in front of an audience before. But to be honest, it was a bunch of goldfish-hungry preschoolers, and I was playing silly characters. I was not talking about things like books versus movies or how suffering has been in our lives. But I didn't let the fear of writing and giving a speech in front of my friends stop me. I didn't, even though it was nerve-wracking. Another thing I was terrified to do was audition for the student band at my church. I've talked about this before, but it was a big and terrifying thing for me to do. But I love it every time that I get to play and worship God with the team. If I had let fear control me, I might have never auditioned in the first place. But now, I'm facing a new challenge, unlike any I've faced before. Something that I personally thought I would never do. I'm going to Gdansk, Poland on a mission trip this summer. There are a lot of things I'm going to have to do that I'm pretty worried about. For example, I'm going to have to go on an airplane. And yes, I know that statistically I'm safer in an airplane than in a car, but I am terrified of heights. And not only that, I'm going out of the country for the first time, and the mission trip is 10 days long, and I've never been away from home for that long ever. All of these new and exciting situations are pretty scary, but I'm determined to do it. Even though it feels hard, it's something that I've wanted to do for a long time. I've wanted to go on a mission trip out of the country to help strengthen and encourage the church around the world and to help them spread the gospel. Even though it's going to be hard, I know that God is with me and will protect me, just like he has done for all of his children. Many people in the Bible experience fear. One example is Joshua. In Joshua 1:1-3, it says, "After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua, son of Nun, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now then, you and all these people, get ready to cross the Jordan River into the land I will give to them, to the Israelites. I will give you every place where you set your foot, as I promised Moses." Joshua went from being Moses' assistant to being the leader of the people of Israel. I'm sure that Joshua was terrified to take on this role, but he knew that he just needed to trust God. God told Joshua 3 different times to be strong and courageous. God knew that Joshua would need strength and courage to lead the people of Israel, and that he would mainly need to trust God and abide by his laws. Another example of someone who was fearful was Gideon. Gideon asked God to perform many signs for him. Yes, that's right. Gideon asked God to prove himself before he would trust that God would guide him. Gideon asked God to do 3 signs for him. The first one was when Gideon met the angel of the Lord. The angel told Gideon that God was going to use him to set free the Israelites from the people of Midian. But Gideon wasn't sure. He brought meat from a young goat, unleavened bread, and a pot of broth. The angel had Gideon place it on a rock, and suddenly the rock burst into flames and burned the meat, bread, and broth. Gideon believed the Lord and tore down an altar of Baal and an Asherah pole that his family had been forced to set up. After this, the Midianites, Amalekites, and other eastern people crossed over the Jordan and got ready to attack Gideon and his people. But before Gideon attacked them, he asked God to do 2 signs for him. Gideon put a piece of wool on the threshing floor and asked God to make the fleece wet and the ground dry. When God had done it, Gideon then asked for the reverse, for the ground to be wet and the fleece to be dry. And when God had done it again, Gideon knew that God was with him. Even though Gideon came from the smallest clan and wasn't the best warrior, God still used him, even in his fear and doubt. One more person that experienced fear was Jesus. Since Jesus was fully God and fully man, he experienced human emotions like fear. In the Garden of Gethsemane, I'm sure that Jesus was terrified about being crucified. He asked God to take the suffering from him if possible, but he also asked God to do his will. Even though Jesus was afraid, he went through with the most painful death. But he defeated death and came back to life to save everyone who chooses to follow him. Fears I've talked about so far are examples of one kind of fear in the Bible, the fear of man, or the fear of people and situations. But there is another type of fear, the fear of God. When I was younger, I really struggled to understand what this meant. Did God want us to be afraid of him? But as I've learned more, I've come to understand the fear of God to mean honoring God. Psalm 33:8 says, "Let all the earth fear the Lord. Let all the people of the world revere him." David is not saying that we should be afraid of God, but that we should honor him in everything. If we fear God in this way, by honoring him in all we do, others will notice it, and that's a gospel sharing opportunity. The fear of God helps us to overcome the fear of man and any situations this life brings. So how can we practically overcome the things that make us afraid? How can we learn to do things even when we are afraid? Sometimes we have to remind ourselves that we can do things afraid. I'm sure some of the people that I mentioned in the Bible did things afraid. But there's a difference between being afraid and doing it, and doubting that you can do it. When we are afraid and still do the thing that intimidates us, we are taking those fearful thoughts and feelings captive and not letting them control us. But when we doubt that we can do the thing that scares us, those thoughts creep in faster and faster and overwhelm us and push us further into the middle seat. 2 Corinthians 10:5 tells us to take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. Whether that's taking a fearful thought captive or taking a thought that isn't honoring God and putting it out of our mind, when we do that, we are honoring God. Another thing we can do is be brave. Now, I know that is easier said than done, but sometimes we forget that we can't have bravery without having fear. If you didn't have some fear, you wouldn't really have anything to be brave about. You just wouldn't be afraid of it. Bravery always involves action in spite of fear. There are plenty of examples of missionaries who had to fight fear and be brave, like Corrie ten Boom. If you don't know her story, Corrie ten Boom repaired watches and clocks, but ended up helping hide Jews during World War II. She experienced a lot of fear and worry. Even though she was scared, she still did what was right and was brave when she helped hide Jews in her home, even when it meant that she and her family were taken to concentration camps too. She must have been terrified, but her fear of God and her desire to honor him was greater than her fear of the Nazi leaders. She is one of many examples of bravery and trusting God, even when it was terrifying. We can follow these examples when we feel like we are in the middle seat, surrounded by choices that scare us. In conclusion, fear is a natural part of human life. Sometimes we all experience the fear of man and situations in life. Fear can be overwhelming, pressing in on us on both sides like the little sibling in the middle seat. Sometimes that middle seat of life can feel intimidating, especially when we have an important choice to make. But we can know that the fear we might be feeling won't last forever. And we can remind ourselves that we have a choice: to fear people and situations around us, or to fear God by keeping our eyes on him as our source of strength and courage. So I hope the next time that you find yourself squished between two choices in the middle seat of life, I hope you will remember that there is a God on the throne that is watching over every choice you make and every seat you take. Gavel Master?